right.
Excited to learn about making maps.
Excellent. So just one more thing, and then I'm going to pass it off to Anthony so we can dig into map making. But I just wanted to review our social code. Just a reminder that you will be muted unless we call on you and you raise your hand. Feel free to share your thoughts and questions in the chat box. We're always taking a look at those. Just a reminder that you can raise your hand using that button if you'd like to speak. We also ask that you're just be courteous, kind, and respectful. This is a social, and so we want everyone to feel like they belong and have fun. And if you have any distractions, if you are watching this on a tablet or your phone, looks like all of you are doing a great job with this right now, but looks like you have it set somewhere, so we're not going on a roller coaster ride. So if you can just limit any distractions, don't make silly faces or whatnot, that will be helpful. And we just ask that you stay engaged and participate. So with that, we're very excited to have Anthony here and to dive into maps. I'll pass it off to you, Anthony.
All right. Thank you so much for the introduction. Welcome, everybody. My name is Anthony, as I said before. Just thought I'd get to let you know a little bit more about me before we move on to our first part of this session. I'm definitely not an expert by any means in map making, but I love maps. I started to love maps when I was really little with National Geographic magazines, just all of the pictures and places and things that were on them. And then as I got older, I really got into topographic maps, which we might talk or look at a little bit more today. And the idea of just these places that I could maybe someday go, or mountaintops that I could visit. So that's where my passion started with maps. So I'm really looking forward to sharing what I know today. And I have a gut feeling that probably everyone here that's visiting our call today brings a little bit of expertise with you as well. And I encourage you to share out when you have that opportunity. So first of all, just start at the basics. What are maps, right? Like, what are they for? In this basic definition, it's a symbolic representation of a place of selected characteristics, usually on a flat surface, right? I think that when I was younger, like all of us, we loved the idea of treasure maps, right? They had, you see a treasure map and you think of adventure, right? You think of riches and rewards. So that's always, when I was younger too, a great and exciting thing to think about with maps. But they come in lots of shapes and forms and styles, lots of different pictures. So in general, they're used to help us communicate from one person to another, a sense of place, right, that exists, right, and what we want to tell about that place. So in the art form behind that, behind making maps, is called cartography, okay? And that's the study and practice of actually making these maps, okay? So that's combining science and aesthetics and technique and your own personal design, really, that can come into making maps. And the whole idea is if you can effectively communicate from yourself to those people you're making a map for, right? So your goals are met. And with that said, I have a couple of questions here for you before we move on too much further. But obviously, if you're on this call today, you probably like using maps, I hope. But what do people use maps for? If you want to throw that in the chat box, that'd be really neat to see right now. If you do use maps, what do you use them for? What purposes do maps have in our daily lives? I know, thinking of going to theme parks, right? If you go to a theme park, there's maps there to help us get around, find different rides, find us where the food stands are, things like that. Maps can be used to figure out how to get to a friend's house, right? To navigate, there we go. To get from one place to another. Sure. How else are maps used? Let's see, finding a way around places in games. That's right, that's huge. Absolutely. Me and my family, I see one here, we use them for sailing a lot. Ooh, yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of roots in history that I only just kind of am aware of when it comes to these nautical maps. There's some pretty cool things around that too. find the path of where you're trying to go. That's right. To find wherever you are going with no trouble. That's right, because getting lost is no fun. That's for sure.
I also saw that Rowan mentioned that they've used subway maps before too. So different types of transportation. That's pretty cool.
That's right. Yeah. What else we have? I like just looking at them. That's right. I love just looking at maps. I can spend hours just checking out different maps. Great. Lots of great answers. Thanks. Let me move forward here. So the really neat thing to get into is they're used for a lot of purposes, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But this piece about their representation. So what does that mean? This is why I included this picture you see here, where someone cut up a map and used it as this artistic piece, which I just thought was really cool. And the point around that is that obviously with art, right, we're trying to display an image, to tell a story. And that's really what's going on even with maps that are functional, right? And a good map, and that it's symbolic representation, right? And often with a map, you're actually removing information, right? You're taking things away to make sure what message you do want to send or what information you do want to give is really clearly there. And that's something key to think about, because just imagine right now sitting at home thinking about your hometown, and if the name of every address was on the map just in your town, and then with every business, then every historical fact and everything you could think about that could be information that could be on a map, it would just be loaded with words, kind of like this screen, right? It wouldn't really have anything nice to look at, and it would be really confusing. So I really thought this was a fun way to talk about that example here with this particular screen. Though we will talk about some apps that are really specific for information for sure in a minute here. I just want to make sure I touch on all my notes so I don't miss anything. So has anyone here ever made a map already? Oh, I see a hand raised, kind of, sort of, right? Yeah. Yeah. Has anyone here ever sat down for a second, and we'll get to the screen in a moment, and just even had to draw out scribbles on something like, hey, this is how you get from, you know, Mr. So-and-so's class to Mrs. So-and-so's class here at school. You gotta, and actually drawn it out. Yeah, that's making a map, right? For sure. It's a really just brief, quick map, but it's the exact information people might need to see to understand, oh, go straight, looks like I take a left, and it's one, not two, but the third door on the right. That's making a map. Let's see what we have in here. I love drawing maps too, for sure. Cool. So with that, maybe not so much on sitting down and quickly telling someone how to make it from one class to another that might be new to your school, but there are, in general, some basic elements, right? When we think about really getting into designing a map, there's even more than 5, but generally there's these 5 base elements that are on a map. So I thought it'd be fun to kind of walk through these here today and see if we recognize any of these that are on this screen, and then we'll kind of get into what their names are and what their purposes are. So let's look at this nice picture here, A. If you can you see me hover over the screen with my little mouse here? Great. So if you look at A, if you want to put it in your chat box, what is A? What is that thing? Who knows what that might be?
Looks like
Number 4.
Megan.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's right. 4. That's right. Yeah. It helps us figure out direction on the map. Often the names is compass rose. If you do a little digging, which I was just doing today, just there's some really great history behind compass roses. One thing that even draws me to maps is that so often they're just these beautiful artistically created pieces in themselves that are on a map, that have some really neat things to look at for sure. Great. So why have one of these on a map? What do they help people figure out when you're looking at a map? Any ideas?
Maybe if someone wants to answer, they can use the raise the hand button. We could unmute them. Anyone wants to give it a stab?
I see show what direction things are in. That's right. Yep, to show north, south. Yep, the 4 cardinal directions. Sure. That's right. Great. Okay. Now B. What's B? Yeah, there we go. Number 2, it's a legend. That's right. So what does this help us do? What are we looking at here when we look at B, these map legends? One thing I see, which I like about maps, yeah, it tells you about stuff on the map. That's right. It kind of helps us. It's like its own little like translator. And that's what I like about maps too, is that they have all these different symbols, right? And then different maps can have different symbols for sure. And that's what I think is really fun about maps too, is when you look on a map, especially when it's one that might be more creatively designed than others, there's some really neat symbols. So this legend kind of helps work as a translator for us when we look at our map to help us understand when we look across that larger map, what's going on here? What where are there roads or different types of roads or trails, or on this legend it's showing there might be planes and airports, or government offices in different places like that. Yeah, to show us what things stand for. Very good. Okay. Now C. What's that over there? What's going on with C? Yeah, it's scale. You folks are nailing this for sure. Yeah, so it helps us, right? So the whole point of this map, right, is where as a cartographer, you're creating something that you want to represent that's a space in this place somewhere, right? And when we communicate that to other folks, we want them to understand just how big or how small different things are. So this is why we have a scale. So when someone else is using that map, they can get an idea of how big of that picture is that they're looking at, right? So whether, when they're looking on something, it's like, that's not probably a pond, that might be a huge lake, right? If you just see a little blue, squiggly blue, because if you can use your scale to reference how big that is. If you do a lot of, whether it's traveling in a car or especially, my routes with maps are to be able to navigate through the wilderness or on hiking trails, to help you figure out, wow, how far that might be. Can I really walk that far in one day? I don't know. So scale really helps communicate what that place is. Now, D, you don't see this so much, I think, in our everyday travels, but this is definitely an important element on a map. What is D? Yeah, grid lines. That's right. Now, what are grid lines used for? Does anyone have anything you'd like to add in there with grid lines? So again, with grid lines, right, they help us find our place on a map. They can be used to communicate different locations. They can help us find our exact location in relevance to that larger picture where that place is on our globe, right? When we think about grid lines, they can help communicate to folks really specific locations. Like on D here, it's pretty big, right? There's like a zero, starts at 0 and goes up to the right, 1, 2, 3, 4, then all the way up to 12. But if you really wanted to start pinpointing, you could break those down into smaller segments in between to really specify where a certain thing is or place is on that map. All right. Coordinates, that's right. Great, latitude and longitude, thank you, perfect. Okay. Now, last of these 5 elements is E. What are we looking at when we see E? I think through deduction, we kind of figure that out, right? Title. It's really important to know, where this place is and what the purpose is too. So place and purpose is really, really important. So if you look at this title, it's a map of the sea areas, and I can't read it. It's pretty small underneath there. but it's the shipping forecast. So obviously this is a map really intended to communicate around nautical travel for sure. Okay. Great job, everybody. So in general, there are two types of maps that you can kind of put all maps into, more or less in general. There are reference maps, like you see here at the top. Okay, kind of this is how they might be represented. Then there's these other types of maps that are thematic maps. Okay. Now, where might we see in the bottom here, if you look at this thematic map, as I call it, where might we come across a thematic map in our travels? Where we might seen one of those before? Maybe in a newspaper, maybe in a classroom, places like that. Yeah, research studies. Thank you. That's right. At school, sure, absolutely. So then pausing there, then looking above, what we call a reference map, where do we see those types of maps in our travels? When we think about reference maps. What I picture, hiking, that's right. I'm a little old school. I picture a car's glove box and pulling out a road map out of a glove box of a car, right? Yeah, so there's those two different types of maps, right? A reference map is really sticking to this first, like our first part of our conversation. It's really representing a place with this visualization and really help us to get to understand that place in this one way, which kind of helps you picture what is really there physically, right? And where with a thematic map, it's really used to present information, right? Like research, various things like that. Other important information. So for example, when we look at this reference map, what are some of the things that we can really understand about this place? Right? It emphasizes that spatially, we don't see the complete map represented here with like scale and legend, but understand that it's a reference map, we can see information that there's a large body of water. What else? There's different colors. Like what do we think we can just kind of infer? What do you think the green represents here? Yeah, grassy lands. Yep. Oh, I see someone said there's a densely populated area. Yep. What do you think that might be? In the green or probably up in here, right? That definitely, we can just kind of think, well, that looks like a really densely populated area. Higher altitude, sure, altitude when we get into topographic maps. Parks, yeah, absolutely. Good job. Now, taking a deeper look at thematic maps. This is a fun one. Okay. So thinking about what their purpose is, right? Which is to communicate that information and the statistics in relationship to a certain place. So in here, it's favorite treats by state. So if we look at this map and we find what state we're from, I think a lot of us are from Vermont, and we have another person on here from Nevada. As much information as we can gather from this is pretty specific, right? It's information that's specific. It doesn't really tell us a lot more about that place or even how to travel around there. But with Vermont, can't even really tell from here exactly what our favorite treat is, but we can kind of get an idea of how these thematic maps work versus, I just read yum. That's right, yum, versus reference maps. Okay. If I can bring up my notes, one sec here. And we're going to switch slides. Now, what kind of map is this that we're looking at? You want to put that in the chat box. We have reference maps and thematic maps. What kind of map are we looking at here? Hogwarts, that's right. We're definitely looking at, yes, because it has a clear title. Great. That's right. It's a reference map. Mythical reference. Okay. Yes.
I would just
Harry
like to point out
Potter.
how
Sure.
excited some of the callers are from you using the Hogwarts map.
Great.
I saw
Yeah.
people
It's an
cheering.
awesome. Yeah, it's a reference map, but it's also a fantasy map, and that's one thing that some really great maps and really fun maps to look at are these fantasy maps where people are not just communicating a place that really exists, but they're taking what's in their heads, right? What we imagine, and then communicating that in this form, which is just super cool. Um, and what is really neat about this, right, is if we had read a
Anthony,
story and maybe there was, yeah, please
I
jump
want
in.
to point out that Rowan commented in the chat, very observant, that there's no legend.
Yeah, that's right. There's no legend. So that's the next part of this, or the elements that are missing, right? So we see there's a title, but there's no legend, right? What else is missing from our map? Scale. Yeah, there's no scale. That's right. And you have no grid lines. So there's no scale, there's no legend, and there's no grid lines. But what we do have are two things. We have the title, and does everyone see the compass rose? Yeah. So it can be an awesome map and still not have all those 5 elements, right? Okay. Now, why probably a lot of you came here today is how do we make maps, right? Well, there's lots of ways to make a map. And we keep in mind what type of map that we want to create. And then I personally, I'm wondering about folks here, but if you want to throw it in the chat box, as we talked about thematic maps and reference maps, what do you prefer? Do you like reference maps or thematic maps? What do folks here prefer? You can either say reference, thematic, reference, great. Awesome. Lots of thematic too, great. Yeah, and in some cases, you can even have a really good thematic map that has some reference to it, for sure. But generally, we like to, in this beginning phase, kind of put them in 2 buckets. Yeah, and some of us don't have a preference, and that's fine too. So if you look on my screen here, because there's different types of maps and there's different ways we engage with maps, right? And different purposes of maps. So a lot of us are familiar with using Google Maps, right? Like on the top left here. And generally that can be used, we'll often use that to figure out how to get from point A to point B. And generally, how long is it going to take us to get from here to there? Because it has all these really great features. Has some other great features too. You can really dive into it, make your own maps online with that piece, but it may not be able to easily come up with this representation like you might see on some of the other maps we looked at before with the compass rose and those things, or grid lines. And then there's handmade maps. People still make handmade maps. If you look to this one on the top of the right of the screen here, now this I found interesting. This is a whole business somebody has, which I just thought was kind of inspiring. They're an artist, but in their business is to make handmade maps for different events, weddings, family reunions. So when there's guests coming in from all over and you want to hire this artist to help tell your guests how to, when they come visit you and they're going to be staying for this event, to get around your community, you can work with this artist and they'll create a map for you to share with those folks. And when I think of maps as art, I thought that was a really pretty piece for sure. And then again, there's even another picture of another really nicely made handmade map. It may not have all the elements, but it draws us in, it gets our imagination working. It has definitely has symbols, right? When we think about maps using symbols, if you look across these two maps here, they have lots of symbols in them. And then the bottom left, though I'm not myself very familiar with Minecraft. Oh, I see some hands going up. Yeah, that's huge, right? That is its own like endless world from what I understand. And you definitely need maps to get around in Minecraft, and you can make maps in Minecraft too. And there's some resources in there as well. So that's a fun way to engage with maps. And then another way people often find themselves engaging in kind of this like modern map world is Google Earth, right? That's a fun way to engage. You get to have this like virtual globe you're spinning around and go visit places all around the world. That's a fun way to, when you want to make your own map, you can kind of zoom in and look at a place to either get some inspiration or see what's there, or just use it as a building block to create your own eventually flat map that you want to present to another group or people. Slime Rancher. Okay, here we go. So what's important with map making, right, is that you're the designer. Okay, so if you could create a map right now, what are some things that are maps that you like? What would be a map, if you want to throw it in the chat box, that you like to make? State maps? Great, yeah, some state maps, that's very cool. That's the one map hanging up in my house right now is one of the states. World maps, sure, to show the whole world. Dogs who live near me, now we're talking. There we go, Lauren. Cloth, yep. Map of my story, that helps me think about where things are. Yep, very cool. Elevation maps, yeah. Topographic maps, I love topographic maps. I love looking at this different, that like kind of texture that you can get from the lines with topographic maps. There's all kinds of maps. And the cool thing about map making, backcountry ski trails, yep. State maps, they keep coming in. Yeah, pattern maps for showing various things. Scavenger hunt maps, now we're talking. Yeah, those are super fun, scavenger hunt maps. Oh yeah, that's right. So when it comes down to some really great things, is when you think about creating your own maps, whether you do it all by hand or you use other tools and resources with software online, is that you really are the designer, right? You are the creator of the map, which I think is pretty cool. And you can put your own personal touch on a map and your own artistic kind of like flavor, so to speak, which can be really fun when making a map. And there's just these basic principles that you want to stick to, right? Or think about, what is the purpose of your map? Who do you imagine, if you're going to make a map, who do you imagine using it, right? And what do you want to show them, right? So who do you picture using your map, right? And what do you want to show them? Yeah, sometimes you might make maps for yourselves, right? Sometimes you might make maps to try to guide other people or to share with other people. Sure. Let me just bring up some more of my notes here. Okay, so thinking of the designer, right? You can use all types of platforms and things. But we want to just think about these elements that we talked about before, right? The title, legend, grid, direction, and scale. Now, of all of these, I think that depending on how you use grid, it might be the more challenging part to apply when making a map. But there's lots of ways to make a map. So I was wondering if for folks that have already made a map in the past or thinking about making the map or a map, what are some resources that you know of or can think about? Or what are some tools or things you might want to have on hand and using to make your map? A ruler? Yeah. So rulers. Yeah, great. Other maps, absolutely. References, history, a great one. We'll touch on that again in a minute. We'll come around to history for sure. Paper. I just make pretend maps. That's awesome. Pretend maps are awesome. Paper, pen, ruler. Yep. Um, when we look at maps, right, and I want you to keep putting those in. Compass, that's what I was about to get to, yes. When we think about maps and how they're constructed, one thing that's not on these elements here, but generally all maps are made in a particular way too. So there's almost like this 6-piece in the basics, which is what direction is the top part of a map, right? If we have north, south, east, and west, north, that's right. So all maps are made with true north, right, as that top part of our map. And we're not going to go too deep into this, but then there's magnetic north, and that's where the compass rose can also be utilized to inform us what might be also known as declination, right, where magnetic north is versus true north on our map as well, if you're using a compass and traveling and things like that. Awesome. So when we think of maps, I thought I'd share this one a little bit closer. So maps are often, they serve a purpose, and often we see them, and it may not be always exciting, right? But they can show us different things, okay? So when we think about maps that would be helpful for others, right, in our community, this is one that was recently made. What are some interesting things in your communities that you think people might find useful if you were to make a map? Or just maybe something they don't know that's there. So in this one, just as an example, it gets people thinking about either where the different schools and libraries are, hospitals, different regions, schools, supervisory unions, and it's all overlaid on one map. So you can kind of select it in different layers to get what story you're looking at. But let's see, what trees are where. Oh, I like that one. Yeah, you might want to have a map that just shows you what specific trees are where. For sure. Yeah, where your little libraries are. Yeah, local, yep, country, market. You could, whatever you want to show out there, yeah. What restaurants are doing takeout right now? I didn't even think of that. That's awesome. That's a great one. Where can you get takeout? For sure. Yeah, where the houses are in your neighborhood. So what we're getting at, again, is that story again around there's a lot of information that you can put on a map. And as the designer, it's up to you, right? What do you want to tell people on your map? What do you want to show them? In some cases, you might be asked, hey, Wilson, we need you to create a map that shows this, XYZ. And then as a cartographer, you can still put a lot of your own personal touch on that map as you design and create it. But the fun part is when you really get to sit down and think, what do I want to share out? What do I want to show other people? Oh, what birds are where? Yeah. Can anyone hear the birds in my background today? I have a house full of little chicks. Yep, they're all at my house. That's right. Right before this meeting, I know the last week, if you attended it, there was the birding DLS. Right before I got online today, I went outside, and there was a hawk right above me flying around and it's screeching and making sounds. That'd be a great thing to probably put up to let some of those folks know so they could put on a birding map, right, as far as sighting birds. Okay. So I'm not even sure where we're at with time here, but I think we're kind of getting through this. Is as we think about those basic elements, right, those 5 elements of a map and the importance they play in a map, and then this is just some more samples of community maps. And I just want to touch on symbols, right? You can also create your own symbols for these maps. And in this case here, in the top left, it's pretty straightforward. That's a trail map. But if you kind of look all the way over to your right, there's different business symbols here to represent things that are on a map. So you can have a lot of fun if you're really starting from scratch, even creating your own symbols that you can put into that legend too. let's just say the bird map would just be a map of Anthony's house. Oh my goodness, it could be. But what I'd like you to do is to think about, oh, let me go back one, sorry about that. What map you would like to make, right? So for this week's challenge, to take those basic elements and, you know, if you want, and it helps you to have direction, right? For some of us, it helps to have a little bit of constraint, like, and to give us something to work with. And if you'd like, you could really think about a map and how it could be used by your community, right? Whether it's your town community, or maybe you're in an online, you know, book reading community. So it could be either or somehow. But a map that could be used by and found useful within your community if it needs direction. But it doesn't have to be that. What I'd really like you to do is to take the time using those, as many of those 5 elements as possible. Create your own map, okay? And incorporate the compass rose, incorporate using a legend, and think about colors, right? We haven't talked about that today, but colors can really represent various things on our maps as well. So incorporating those. Let's say a map's not striking your interest, but we want to think about compass roses, right? You could do a little investigating on some of those aspects around a compass rose and bring that back to us on Thursday as well, because there's some really cool stuff when you get into what's behind a compass rose for sure too. So with that though is, you know, for some of us, you might be thinking online versus offline, and I'd like to share some resources out that you might find helpful. But before we get there, do other people have some really great resources? I think we talked about this a little bit before, of where you can find some useful online places to learn about how to make maps or to use while making a map. Google Maps, absolutely. I can attest to that. You can use Google Maps, take a screenshot of a place, put it in a Word document, and start building from there. Map to my imagination. Imagination maps are great. MapQuest, I haven't thought about MapQuest. Google Maps. Inside covers of old books, that'd be really cool. Yep, I like that idea. Yeah, so you can use fun things around your house. There might be old National Geographics and you want to take one of those, maybe do something and build off of one of those too, or use it as another reference map. You could do that. I think we talked about before around, you might want to have like a ruler, tape measure, Lord of the Rings map. Sure. Yep, you could reference that when we get to fantasy maps. And there's some other resources I have here that might get you thinking too with your map making. Okay. Right off the bat, obviously there's some great ways to make maps in Minecraft if you're into Minecraft. There's some great YouTube channels. I'm big in YouTube. One thing that's key is you know, spending that time sifting through it if you're a YouTuber to find the right information for sure. Then you might just want to figure out your own property, right? And there's some great resources around how to, there's 11 acres behind my house, and this little, I'm not sure where my acres end and the next begin, and that's okay, but you might really want to take some time and see if you can dive a little deeper into your own property line. And then there's a great tutorial here also around using Google Maps as well. And then there's a few more here that we're going to look through, but how to compose a map with Google Earth. So not Google Maps, but using Google Earth, and there's some great resources there. And then absolutely, if you want to make a treasure map, there's some really cool resources online too. Even if it's a straight up real functioning map that has that really cool artwork like we see on other treasure maps on movies and TV, you can use that resource as well. And then if you are more of a nuts to bolts online person, you can check out ArcGIS online. I think there might be some people on here today that might be familiar with this. I'm not sure. and then the USGS service. Some great resources to share out. So that is, in a nutshell, what I have today as a presentation for map making. So I'm glad to hear from some other folks. If you have any questions, anything you'd like to add.
So Anthony, one thing I was thinking might be helpful is we
Sure.
did get a question just to recap the challenge. Could you possibly flip through your slides back to the 5 elements?
Sure.
Part of what the challenge is to create a map
Right here.
with
No,
and
keep going. Keep going. Right there.
There we go. Thank you. And you know, you might whoop. I
Nope.
think we have a
Go the
little
other
lag
way.
time, so
Oh, lag time. There we go.
There you go.
yeah. So yeah, you can create a map as Anthony mentioned. You know, there's lots of different tools. So it can be using a pencil and paper, and it can be something in your community as close as your backyard, your property, you know, some woods nearby, to something that might benefit your community. So a map on how to get to the nearest urgent care hospital, something like that, or the nearest open market. And what we would love to see is if you include in your map each of these 5 elements. So the title, a legend, a grid, direction or compass rose, and a scale. And just have a lot of fun with it. You know, I saw some people posting about mapping out something in their imagination or for a story they're writing. So that would be a really interesting map to see, and stretch yourself by trying to include these 5 elements, because I think it will, even though it's an imaginary map, it'll make it feel so much more real, just like that Hogwarts map or like the Lord of the Rings that we see. So it really helps the imagination to go a little further.
So yeah, we can just walk through it again real quick to help people remember. So the legend, if you look on here, it's like that, the little box you often see on maps. And what it does, it helps tell what different symbols are on your map, whether if a road's a road or a trail's a trail, or if, you know, whether it's a house or a castle. So that's what the legend does, because I saw that as a question. And then the title, in some maps you see it on the top, and this one here, it's on the bottom. Maybe what works for you as you create your map. Then a grid is used to help us pinpoint real specific directions or places on our map. And they often don't always have to go across, you know, your full map. It could be, you know, up the side and then across the bottom. Scale, that can be a challenge, and don't let that stump you by any means, right? Just do your best you can, or just have that in mind and realizing that's an important part in creating a map. Picture the skull. So anywho, I love the chat. It gets me laughing sometimes too. These are great things happening down here. So scale, right, to help us understand the actual measurement and where it could fit into the real world as well. Is a blueprint a map? Great question. I would say yes, right? It's a map of a specific object or thing that you might want to build, for sure. And we sketch those out a lot too, right? We might kind of roughly blueprint an idea of how we want to rearrange our room. We might call that a blueprint in some cases, or something really we're building, like a playhouse or a chicken coop. Seems to be popular blueprint these days. A garden map, absolutely. Great idea. Great idea. Yeah, mapping out your garden is a really good idea to do before you start planting. I've learned that the hard way. Is a family tree a map? That is a really cool question. I think that you could present it visually, maybe in a way that's like a map. Why not? Because we didn't touch on this today, but maps are really cool when you can think about, you know, presenting a place in history, right? You can go back in time with maps to talk and tell a story from the past. So you could do a family tree as a map, or you could even—
Anthony, I would add, so with the family tree, if it's displayed as a tree where it's just like, this is my mother and father and this is their parents, but what if you, I think where you're going is, if I said, this is where I grew up, these are my parents, this is where they came from, and you show it almost geographically, location wise, and then their
Yeah.
parents came from here, then for sure you have a map because you're showing, where people came from and representing that visually, which would be
Yeah.
really cool.
Yeah, it'd be super cool. Exactly. That's what I was thinking too. Yeah. What else do we have here?
I love these ideas that everyone's coming in. I'm going to echo everything Anthony has said. Like, you guys, the sky is the limit. You can be as imaginative as you want. Have fun with this. Take a look before you start your map to just get examples of some of the kinds of maps Anthony talked about today. Go online and just see different visual representations of maps to see what you like, what speaks to you visually as you think about creating whatever kind of map you're going to do.
So I see this one that said a map of the sky is the limit, question mark. So, that is could be a whole other awesome topic, which is around technology today and the ability to start mapping out other planets and the mapping that has been done of our own planet and in other planets. And that is just a whole other fascinating topic in itself. A map of the stars, absolutely.
Mapping solar systems and galaxies. And
Yeah.
Yeah, these are all great ideas. I do want to stress what we love and really encourage you all to do the week's activity and come back on Thursday to share what you've done. Please know that if you don't have an opportunity to get to the activity, you are still always welcome back on Thursday to participate in just seeing what other people have done. So we want you to have fun with this. We want you to be creative, and we want you to come back on Thursday and show off your maps.
Absolutely.
Is it, and I just wanted to mention, if you end up doing a map of your house or something, we just ask that you don't put your address on that map, just because while we're friends, we're from a lot of different places. So you'll just want to keep it so that, people can't Google map your house or whatever. So there's a way to do
Elsa,
that.
I agree with you. She just said this is going to be fun. This is going to be so much fun. I can't wait to see what everybody does. I will say, I'm going to send an email out to everybody. We're going to put the presentation today up in a Google folder, and I'll send you a link to that. So if you want to on Thursday, you can choose to either, show your map just in the screen, but if you're able to take a picture of your map and upload it into the Google folder, it will probably be a better way to view it by everybody. So you'll have two ways to share it. But I'll send you that information, and then you'll get a link on Thursday to come back. So Thursday's Zoom link will be different than today's Zoom link.
It also looks like the Franklin family is holding up a map that they might have drawn while they were on this call. Just wanted to point that out. Pretty
cool.
Oh, nice. That's awesome.
Awesome.
Well, I think with that, unless you guys have any other questions for Anthony, I say we're going to log off and we're going to get working on our maps, right?
Good luck, everybody.
We'll see you all on Thursday, okay?
Have a great week, everybody. Bye.